Now, ladies and gentlemen, having said that, we now proceed with the next session, which is again another crucial topic and subject, and very exciting, I would rather say, cloud and infra security, risk, threats, and challenges. And before I call on stage the honorable panel members who are going to enlighten us on this subject, few pointers of discussion. This panel is going to talk top trends in cloud security, how the cloud phenomenon and the impact of the same on today's businesses, how the perception of cloud services has changed dramatically over the years. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the extremely talented panel of experts in the order of the sequence. Joining us first, Mr. Sunil Kulkarni, CISO from Protean E-Government Technologies Limited. A big round of applause to Sunil ji. Welcome to the panel, Sunil ji. Please have your seat. Joining next, we have, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Amol Patil, Vice President, IT, Infra, QA and Governance from Liberty General Insurance. A big round of applause to Amol. Amol, welcome to the panel. Please have your seat. Joining next, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Stanley Soloman, CISO from HealthIndia Insurance TPA. A big round of applause to Stanley. Stanley ji, welcome to the panel. Please have your seat. Joining next, we have Mr. Sachin Dhumal, CISO from SBI Global Factor. A big round of applause to Sachin ji. Sachin ji, welcome to the panel. Please have your seat. Joining next, we have Mr. Awale Ajay, Head of IT from Aquapharm Chemical. A big round of applause to Mr. Ajay. Welcome to the panel again. Please have your seat, sir. Joining next, we have Mr. Prateek Mishra, CISO from HDFC Credila Financial Services Limited. A big round of applause to Prateek. Prateek, welcome to the panel. Please have your seat. Joining next, we have Mr. Bhushan Hatkar, AVP-IT from SBI Mutual Fund. A big round of applause to Bhushan ji. Bhushan ji, welcome to the panel. Please have your seat. And now I would like to call on stage our honorable moderator of the panel, Mr. Rohit Raman, Managing Partner and APAC Head from ETEK. A big round of applause to Rohit. Rohit, welcome to the panel. Please have your seat. So Rohit, we've got a great panel of experts here and looking forward to a cracking session. So all over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good to have all of you here. And I think since yesterday, we have a lot of enrichment in terms of technology upgradation, challenges, threats. There has been all over discussion about how we are progressing in technology and at the same time, the challenges that we face. So today what we are going to talk about is the cloud adoption. It's been so that we are moving to cloud, and inherently we thought that when we are moving to cloud, we are safe. Everybody is talking about cloud. We are talking about improvement in efficiency. We are talking about optimization of resources. And obviously there is a perceived thought also that we'll be saving a cost, because it's everything going to be digital and no investment in physical infrastructure. But is it that the reality, or is there anything more to it? Because what we have realized over a period of time that with the growth in technology, adoption of digital infrastructure, so are the emerging threats. And when there are threats, obviously there are other challenges associated with that. We need to completely transform the infrastructure. We need to completely transform the way we work in the traditional manner. So are we really adaptable to this technology? Are we really very easily adapting to cloud infrastructure or not? So today, our distinguished panelists will try to resolve some of the critical areas related to threats, perceived challenges, and how we are trying to solve the problem. This is what we are eyeing today. In the present scenario of changing landscape, there's one question that comes to my mind, which I like to throw to one of our distinguished panelists, Sunil. I have taken down some of the critical aspects. So Sunil, a question which I like to throw upon to you: in this changing landscape, what are the critical decisions that you have taken, keeping in mind your current organization's work behavior and the services that you are providing to your customer? Can you please throw light on that?
Yeah, thanks. From a decision point of view, the most important part, what we have done is we have ensured that whatever systems which we have those relevant documentation in place, because that is more important from a response point of view. The next is the changing threat landscape. It is now no more next generation firewalls or maybe no kind of IDs and IPS which will come and prevent you, because your business is 360. So you have your security implementation or security controls has to be 360. So that is where we have implemented 360-degree controls. What I mean to say is we have taken right from security threat intelligence, where we do kind of an, which with the help of AI and ML, what we have. With the help of that, we then have those relevant systems. We have automated the entire incident response, the process, because that is more important. Just having an SIEM or just having a SOC who is working 24/7 and 365 days, but that doesn't help. You need to kind of cover up your dwell time. The moment the incident is triggered and the moment the incident has been remediated. That is a dwell time, and that is how we have automated the certain processes. The other things which what we have is the regular standard controls, which includes patching, ensuring that all those relevant controls are there. Continuous assessment is something which we have brought in, and then those existing technologies which we have tried to fine tune that. So that is from an overall strategy what we have taken as an implementation to enhance the posture or to cover up the ever-changing landscape of threats.
So Sunil, I mean, isn't it interesting to know that with the adoption, there was some associated investment also required?
Yeah, so investment is there, but then again, it is like we need to do a kind of a cost-benefit analysis. Like what is your risk, what is the risk, and what are your cron gels? And based on that, you need to kind of identify what are the risks, and then basis that risk, what is kind of an investment is required. So there are vendors who are very costly, and then there are vendors who are able to deliver those kind of features at a lesser rate. So that is where you need to kind of evaluate at least 4 or 5 vendors or 4 or 5 OEMs when you are trying to mitigate a risk, to understand, okay, fine, which will suit the best for you. So depending upon that, you can take a kind of a call and then have those kind of irrelevant investments done. So that is in a short we can discuss.
So basically, I take from your statement that it has improved a bit of efficiency, though there was some investment required, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting to know. Leading to another topic that comes to my mind is that how significant is to monitor the cloud infrastructure. Can you really protect if you are really not monitoring it? So, this question I like to throw upon to Amol to give a, glimpse of idea on that. That is it really true that, if you are not monitoring, you are actually not protecting?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Now, there are 2 aspects specifically when you go on cloud, just giving you a little bit of background. So, again, I work with Liberty General Insurance, and we took this journey to cloud. Right, we were basically on traditional DC back in 2019, right, towards the fag end. We started this journey, and mid of 2021, we moved 100% on cloud. Now, monitoring, right, some of the aspects do change, right? If you're using their platform, obviously, there are certain set of responsibility which cloud vendors take. But if you're using EC2, similar to what you use, right, in a traditional data center where you own, right, operating system and its responsibility, then you have to employ similar tools which you generally use, right, even in traditional data center. Nothing changes. Now, with respect to proactive monitoring, right, there are certain aspects, right, again, the tools which you use generally is, again, I'm going to name that tool. We use Contrast, which is basically SAS and DAS tool, where you proactively basically detect anomalies in your code, right, where you're hosting your applications. One of the strategy which we have employed is, again, shift left, where we ensure before you deliver that code in production, right, what checks are in place, right, what monitoring is in place. So there are tools, again, since we are not IT company, we are heavily dependent, right, basically on our development partners. Then with through processes, we tell them, hey, you have to use this tool, right? Say, for example, code quality, FX Corp, or something else, right? Before it makes a cut to production. And then production, obviously, you have these tools, right, which are in place. And then at perimeter level, firewall level, obviously, you need to have, right, different technologies, right? Like we use Akamai WAF, so that we protect our layer there. Every incident, basically, every anomaly is logged into Splunk, and this is how my team gets alerts, right? And then, obviously, we do not have correlation tool as of now. I think I was talking to you and the importance of correlation, because there are a lot of false positive, and then you have to make sense out of it and act only on those alerts, right, which are extremely critical. You have to fix it. So monitoring, important aspect, right? You cannot do away with this.
So, Amol, you clearly see that, there were certain challenges. So why don't you, from your experience, can you just throw light upon that when this transformation journey was taken by your organization, what other challenges did you face and was associated with transformation?
I think the first biggest hurdle is, right, your budget. So unlike the common notion, cloud is not cheap. It is 2x, 3x. I was throwing some number at him, right? I used to spend some 6 crores. Now I spend close to 20 crores, right, on AWS. So it is not cheap, number one. And some of these technologies, right, as you mentioned, specifically to monitor, right, your landscape are not even cheap. And even after employing, as I mentioned, contracts, all these tools, you have to still use your traditional methods, right? Have this VAPT scans on all 4 levels, host, network, right, application, OS. You have to continue doing it, right, specifically to detect and then prioritize all this stuff. So one of the challenge which we faced, right, obviously convincing, right, management, hey, this cloud has significant advantage over traditional data center, because you are no more investing into CapEx, doing away with these refresh cycles, right, specifically when it comes to hardware. One of the advantages which I had, I don't have to maintain such a big team, right, a SAN specialist, network specialist, right, people who know AWS or any other cloud for that matter are good enough, right. Obviously, they have to keep on upgrading. That is one of the experience which I would like to share with you. Another thing which I would like to share specifically with respect to security challenges. I see cloud is significant advantage. At least you don't have to take care of physical security aspect, because all these players who are in the market, be it Microsoft, be it AWS, be it Google, they are mature. In fact, they are the ones who are, right, driving this change. So in that aspect, I believe this is a significant advantage, right? Once we talk about, hey, you're using some platform, there is inherent, assurance that it will be safe, right? At least this is what I see today. Maybe 3 years back, 4 years back, there were apprehensions, right? But I see a lot of acceptability, especially in Indian market, and this is where you see, right, 2-digit, 3-digit, especially 2-digit growth with respect to these companies. So I feel this is advantage.
Okay, great thought process and great experience that you've shared. So what we can draw from Amol's statement is that, we really need to keep vigil. So if we are going digital, doesn't mean that, if the infrastructure is away from you, it's not in the physical setup, you can really keep your eyes away from that. You had to constantly keep watching. You had to constantly manage the alerts that is being received. And not only that, you need to respond also. So that's a very interesting piece of information that we draw. That drives me to another set of question, which is that, when we are adopting cloud, which means that there are a lot of data that we are sharing over cloud. And whatever applications are hosted there, it is ultimately being used by the end user. So there is always a threat associated with insider. So I'd like to throw this question to, our next gentleman, Stanley. If you can please, throw light on how to manage the insider threats who are sitting far away from your digital infrastructure.
Good afternoon, everyone. One of the recent surveys, what I've gone through, 36% of the threat was threat that took place was from the insider threat. So it was a huge, it was a huge challenge. How do you address this inside threat? And I would like to explain to you ki when we were working on the insider threat, how did we address it? So First is you need to know what you want to protect, right? So we are basically serving almost 35 to 36 insurance company. So the huge amount of PI data and the PS data that is with us. So that needs to be protected. So this is one thing. Second thing is, where are this data stored? Whether the data is stored on the on-premises, whether data is stored on the cloud. So for us, 70% of the workload is onto the on-premises and 30% is onto the cloud. So how do we secure it? That was the biggest challenge from the insiders. So second is when you identify where the data is. Third is what are the people, what are the persons who have access to this data? Maybe the PS data and the PI and the PS data, who all have access to it, right? So when we jotted all this, then how do you control these people from, how do you put the controls to prevent insider threat from the data leakages, right? So now what we have done is, first set of users that we identified who have major access to the data was the privileged access management users, the PAM users. So to have a control on them, we have a PAM tool in place. Then we follow the process of least access given to them. Then we also have one more important point in place wherein we have just-in-time access. So whatever time you require to do some changes to the production environment, you get access at that point of time. Second, when there is the data onto the cloud, you have an insider threat also. Then you have a threat from the service partner or the cloud partner who is serving you. So how do you have a control on them? So again, we have put a two-factor authentication. So user credential and admin credentials are with them, but the next factor authentication that comes to us is to our inside mobiles. So every time when they log in, they have to call us or they have to take the OTP from us. So we are aware of what they are doing. Third is, overall is, we need to monitor all this. So we have put a good monitoring system in place. Then comes the users who are using this data to process and work on day-to-day production. So there we have put user behavior analysis tool. Then we have put DLPs in place. Then we have heavily monitoring tools that has been put into place, right? So these are the things what you have taken to control inside threat. So basically to conclude is, inside the threat prevention is always an ongoing process that needs to be combined with right technologies in place, a good monitoring system in place, and user awareness programs in place. So this is what we can do on this.
Interesting piece to know. So Stanley, you just said that you have a hybrid setup in your organization?
Yeah, we have a hybrid setup in our organization.
Okay. So as we've seen that, we've spoken to three distinguished gentlemen, and there is still we see transition in approach and the nature of challenges that they have faced. Starting from the first gentleman sitting there, then Amol, and then Stanley. Somebody has a complete infrastructure over cloud, somebody is having hybrid. So the challenges are, we have to monitor it, we have to keep vigil. The challenges are that who is accessing it? That also needs to be managed. So they are not digital, they are human beings sitting somewhere in the physical environment. So see how the landscape of cloud infrastructure, the usage, everything has transformed. That leads to another very critical area of thought, and the question that comes to my mind is that, how cloud services have changed. There are service providers, so AWS, Azure, there are private players also that we have come across. So is the service side has also changed? How it has changed? We hear a lot of aspects, the nature of deployment, implementation, everything has changed. So I would like to throw this question to, Sachin, if you can please highlight this aspect of, cloud infrastructure.
Good afternoon. See, if you see, the previously 5 years or 6 years back or 10 years back, we work as a traditional DC servers having a 3-tier architectures. Then we have a AD and ADC place on for the user authentications. Then there are some security controls we implement. Whenever any service provider, cloud service providers comes to your place to engage, or you ask for the engagement for the cloud, they come with the solution like it's cost effective and it is manageless or managementless. You can say that manageless. There is no servers required and like that. But being a part of NBFC, we have some regulatories, and it is very difficult to us go on the footprint on the cloud because of we follow some compliances, some own regulatory guidelines and data security. But if you see last 5 to 6 years, no, their cloud service is dramatically changed. They are start adopting the security concerns. They are very much investment in the security concern, data security, as well as the guidelines, regulatory guidelines, compliances, you can say that. So whenever we ask for the any cloud service provider, what about my data previously, like 5 years before? So they say it is on the cloud. Then the management comes with us, then where my data reside? It is in India or outside the India. Again the GDPR come. So what GDPR will take place on this? Now the cloud service provider come with the data is in India, in this location. So we have some IAM technology where we replace the AD. We have some SOC involvement, because if you do some monitorings and who's logging on the servers, who's accessing your data, that all taken by the SOC, which we can go and integrate your cloud. So this give us a more comfort to us, and this is not happen 1 year, 2 years. It's take 10 years to change this cloud service provider to this position now. And main part done by the unfortunately our pandemic. In the pandemic situation, we work from the home, and we adopt like VPN. Then we require a secure VPN. Then the some of the organization which have a small organization, they not afford to take all the security controls. In that case, cloud is a very good solution they offered with the minimum cost. Good security controls and the cost effectiveness, and that is the reason many of the organizations start adopting the cloud. There are some certain you can say the concerns are there related to not the security but the compliances, which actually generated or the asked by the RBI or the SEBI. So that most probably some of them are taken care, but some of which is not taken care. So there are two things which I want to highlight. One is the right to audit. As of now, I don't know how many service providers allow us to go and do the audit on the cloud. And second is the data. If we want to move one cloud provider to another cloud, so how they data. If I delete the data, how they are going to give us assurance the data is completely deleted. That is the two things which we are struggling. Otherwise, I said the cloud is dramatically changed from last 5 to 10 years.
So was there also change in the regulation by the regulators? Any policies which changed, because you're from SBI Global, right?
Yeah.
So did you also see the impact of that on the way the service providers were providing this service?
Yes, I told you that GDPR. So that was the main concern for us, because that PCI DSS and GDPR is our regulatory. I mean, that guidelines it should be followed by us. And the first point was that where your data reside. If it is not in India, so it is no useful to go on the cloud, because if it's outside the India, then again the data protection rule will be the difference, and we don't know how to manage with them. So that is the main thing where we actually start moving on the cloud. When they are saying that the data is in your India, reside in your geographical location, and we know where it exists.
So we clearly saw that there was a great impact on the service providers also. So the regulatory compliances are not only mandated for the user side and the customer side, it is also important for the service providers to adapt to that. They have to ensure that the customers fulfill their requirement, because there is a great business dependency. Any non-compliant act would lead them to trouble. So it has direct connect with the business. And we have clearly seen here in the discussion that how significant is this. So, now coming back to another way the service has changed in the present scenario. We are a lot hearing about, SaaS model, right? When we talk to our customer, they say that we want a SaaS service. There are customers who would come to us and say, okay, we want hybrid deployment because I have a very complex, infrastructure. So now touching upon the critical thought of SaaS, I will really request, Ajay, why don't you throw light on this SaaS-based model? What is your thought? And what is the adaptability within your organization?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my name is Ajay, and I'm from manufacturing sector. So as I said, I think we are into chemicals. So it's a core manufacturing unit. We are Indian multinational company. But of course, I mean, when it comes to the data or your applications, I think the promoters, I mean, they belongs to that data basically, or that proprietary assets. And that trend is still there, I would say. In earlier days, I think my data should be with me rather than, putting into somewhere in the cloud or some virtual place. So that belonging is still there. But as he rightly said, the pandemic changed the world, and the pandemic changed each and every human. So of course, promoters are part of humans, so they have also changed. And so there is no belonging as such, there is no possessiveness, but the ultimate results they are looking out is, the business should run. And this is a great learning actually COVID has given. So we have gone through that journey. I mean, it's literally, before COVID, what was the status, and after COVID, what was the status. So it's a clear before-after picture, I mean, that can be presented. So when today I say we are 100% on cloud, I think a couple of years back, we were 0% on cloud. So that transformation has, happened. And this is only because of, business continuity planning as such. The weightage given to business continuity planning, the BCP plan in place in each and every organization has, brought some visibility due to pandemic. So as I said, cloud and SaaS majorly uses, because we are not that technical enough being manufacturing into cloud solutions or design of applications or something like that. But we think that yes, the application should be a global application, and that has to have some good base across as well as India. And looking at such aspects, we choose the application and go for that. Now, when you talk about ERP, we have SAP, we have Salesforce, and these are all global OEMs, and they have their SaaS models in place. Then instead of having infrastructure as your services, why not to have software as your services? Because that gives you more liberty towards managing only the applications and the business processes rather than looking into your infrastructure and its threats, its security, or many other aspects actually. Because those are, at the behind the curtain and taken care by the OEMs. So that's the major advantage of, SaaS as a platform, to utilize that and take out your all business needs out of it, simply.
Great, great. But then when we are talking of SaaS, would this also have an impact on the governance model?
No, definitely. I mean, see, when I talk about OEM, of course, their presence, their data storage policies, and your data storage policies, those should be, matched actually. So when I talk about a company, SAP, it's a global organization, and they have presence across all the countries. So what is a mandate? So what is a mandate for a company like a chemical company, Indian manufacturing company? So your data has to reside within the India, first of all, and you should have 100% control on that data. So that assurity is given by the OEM, and you agree on those terms, first of all, and then you follow that. So I would say, data in a virtual place is nothing like that. It's a physical data center somewhere. You don't know that address. But yes, the mandate is like the data should be within your country, within your jurisdiction, because you should claim that and you should avail it whenever it's possible. Yeah.
So that's a very interesting piece to know, the change in the governance model. So we see the complexity, how complex is to go when we are shifting from the physical infrastructure toward digital infrastructure. When we are shifting, it's not just about, transformation of technology, but it is also that we see that there is great involvement of transformation of the people, transformation in the policy, transformation in the way we allow access, transformation in the way we protect the data over cloud. So all these transformations require a lot of I would say, investment. But yes, there are efficiencies. We've seen that a lot of efficiency has improved. There is definitely, we see that there are some OpEx which has gone down. That, somewhat, makes me to think that even though we are on the digital space, but still we use the word infrastructure. We keep our critical, I would say, applications running over there. There also we are maintaining the VMs, but it's virtual, right? There are servers, but it's virtual. But still, we need to have a framework to protect it. So I'd like to, understand from our next panelist, Prateek, would you be, throwing some light on this? This is very interesting for everyone else to know how to, protect the infrastructure layers.
Yeah, so this is and good afternoon to everyone. So this is a very loaded question, as I discussed with you previously in one of our earlier conversations. And it's a very open-ended question as well, how to protect a cloud infrastructure. Because this domain keeps on updating and keeps on changing a lot. And at the same time, we are seeing that a lot of attack vectors are coming up at a very fast pace. So there are groups who are putting up ransomware as a service, as a product, which anyone can use. So if there's a competitor who wants to kill me, then they can always hire some of the ransomware as a service guys to attack our organization and to kill our operation services. So that's very much a fact which we are all accepting. So a couple of years back, I was conducting risk assessment for one of the organization, and which had recently moved into a cloud infrastructure. And this was Amazon Web Services, AWS Cloud. And they had hired a third-party managed service provider to manage it. So the migration was done by the third-party service provider, and the implementation was totally done by the third-party service provider. One of the important aspects which one of the gentlemen touched upon was insider threat over here. And one of the main insider threat for me personally in that particular risk assessment scenario was misconfigurations. So if the administrator hasn't configured any security control within the cloud, so ghost only comes to those who look for them. So if we haven't enabled anything on cloud as a security control, then there won't be any alert. There won't be any alarms getting triggered. Logs won't get generated. So I think the main thing would be to take care of the basics first without looking at the luxurious items. Because in cybersecurity industry, there are a lot of jargons which gets created every now and then. And people get entangled in those jargons. And then there are discussions which happens only about those jargons. And then we are not taking care of the basics. So when I did this risk assessment of this big firm, I found out that the typical simple controls which could be enabled on any cloud infrastructure. For example, on AWS, and any cloud infrastructure, as we all are aware, is a shared responsibility model. So the CSP is responsible for taking care of security of the cloud. Client is responsible for managing security in the cloud. So I cannot cry in front of my cloud service provider telling them that, hey, ransomware attack has happened in the cloud. He'll ask me whether you have implemented, for example, in AWS case, inspector for vulnerability management as a utility. So that was not enabled. Are you doing patch management properly on all the servers or the VMs as you touched upon, the virtual machines, on all the servers? So if it is not happening, then we are at fault. And if you haven't implemented threat detection capability, so for AWS, the analogy would be guard duty over here. So AWS has this beautiful thing called guard duty, wherein they are able to identify threats. And one of the important pieces in those days and still, and if we all discuss it 10 years down the line, would be about zero-day attack. So in zero-day attacks, there is no solution per se, but there is a multi-layered defense capability. None of the products can throw a pop-up to you telling you that it's a zero-day attack which is happening in your organization. There are multiple layers of defense capabilities which have to be implemented. So guard duty is one of those defense capabilities as well. So if one of my servers has got compromised and it is pinging on port 53 to a C2, and if I haven't enabled any log source to detect that, then I'm prone to get compromised, for sure. So which is why guard duty kind of a solution is giving me those kind of an alert. And another thing that I want to harp on over here is continuous monitoring of what is there on the cloud infrastructure. We should never be vendor dependent as an organization. So if we have hired an MSP, we should also ensure that we are looking at the security hub ratings. We are looking at the security configuration ratings. So if we look at AWS Security Hub, there is a framework based on CIS. There is a framework based on AWS own conditional cybersecurity frameworks. And the controls are then reconciled basis the implementation, and a security rating is given to the organization. So these are the 4-5 important points that we implemented in those days to make the organization aware of what is really happening. And then there's a point about incident response. So one of my MSP is an administrator, and this administrator has enabled an S3 bucket, publicly exposing an S3 bucket over the cloud, and giving a statement that we are doing it just for a testing purpose. But then this S3 bucket has been publicly made accessible. And a lot of other issues keeps on popping up. So we will also have to see what is your incident response capability. So at 2 o'clock in the midnight, if one of the testers who have access to the production environment has done something, do you have incident response capabilities to take care of it? Because these cloud service providers will throw up alarms. Will throw up alarms suggesting that the AWS S3 bucket has been made public. You should take care about it. Then you should take care about it if the MSP has made any. So incident response is a very important thing. And another point on these attacks and protecting a cloud infrastructure, Rohit, you have just mentioned a point over here. It's about identity and access management. Often overlooked. Good thing is that these CSPs are enhancing their capabilities. So then there are access analyzers which are getting enabled on their products. So through an S3 access analyzer or an IAM access analyzer, we are able to see whether there are overlapping policies being given or roles being granted to someone. And something that maybe you can always take care of, a pointer from my end would be cross-account policies. So, and how a zero-day attack happens through a cross-account policy. So the MSP or one of my administrators from my own organization, so MSP is using an AWS account, I'm using an AWS account, and they have enabled a cross-account policy, which means that they are not going through the native authentication practices of a user password and a multi-factor authentication. Just by using a switch role concept, they can come from their AWS account into my AWS account. And this is a very easy way to penetrate into my system through their AWS account. And it will become a single point of failure if their AWS account gets compromised. So these are the basics, Rohit. So what I've seen is, and from many conversations that I have had with multiple industry experts on this situation is, that we are running after luxurious items and we are not taking care of the basics. Ultimately, if a hack has happened in the organization and during investigation, if it has been identified that the basic due diligence has not happened and we have only implemented controls without sustaining them, without looking at the effectiveness of those controls, or without calibrating those controls basis my needs and requirements, then we are at a great fault. And last point would be around awareness, very important. We have seen that AWS access keys, for example, or any secret keys, developers will publish it on GitHub. They will create a repository and they will publish the access keys on those GitHub portals. And these are targeted a lot. We have seen these in the recent past, that people will access, the adversaries will access those repositories to identify a secret access key, and then they will try to reuse those secret access keys. So something that we should be looking at from a brand abuse monitoring perspective, because just by sitting within the organization, we won't be able to identify whether the repository is made public, which has been created by a developer. So ultimately, we will have to invest in some brand intelligence and brand abuse monitoring tools to detect those. Maybe ultimately, the final thing would be it will help you in decreasing the dwell time. Hack will still happen, but you will have controls to detect those hacks, and you will have controls to respond to those attacks in a timely manner, is my understanding of it, Rohit.
So I think what a vast explanation of the threats and challenges that we have come across from Prateek, which he has highlighted. One very critical thing that he has highlighted was the configuration, which is very basics. We largely talk about adopting various technologies, but we miss about then how we are configuring it. So any misconfiguration will lead to a major threat. So even if you're having all the important tools in place, but if they are not well configured, you are still prone to those attacks and challenges. And Prateek, just one more thought which is coming to my mind is that you said brand monitoring, right? Which means that, do you really mean to say that there are third party who are providing the service, who is having access to your data? If any leak happens from the third party, do you mean to say that needs to be monitored in a
So multiple ways. Multiple ways. So one of the ways could be, we would all have heard about infostealer malware, for example. Right. So if you are granting access to your cloud ecosystems from personal endpoints, which are not managed by the organization, and then we are not aware of the health of those systems. What if an infostealer malware is able to penetrate in those systems and it is able to take up all the cookies, saved passwords from the internet browser? So that is one. So we have a multiple set of data which is exposed out there on dark web and on surface web as well, wherein the exfiltrations from these infostealer malwares are out there publicized. Second is, so these are third-party entities who excel in providing brand abuse monitoring solution from a perspective that they will help you in identifying whether there is a code repository which is breached or publicly exposed, whether insecure ports are exposed over the internet, or we can always enable it for the third-party services. For example, if you have hired a firm to develop codes on your behalf, we can always monitor their ecosystem, at least the external ecosystem. They won't be able to identify the health of the endpoints, but the external surface can be easily managed. And underground discussions, for example. If someone is discussing about, hey, you have access to HDFC Credila's user ID password, can you help me with those? Because I've seen that even these ransomware as a service operators, they are sending emails, messages to employees of the organization, asking them to come join our organization. If you have any privileged details about those organizations and classified details, you can share those across with us and we will pay you a handsome amount of money. So they are being targeted a lot, these employees who are privileged enough to take care of the basic configurations of the organization. So all these brand abuse monitoring tools would be able to help you identify whether you are being compromised. There is a false positive ratio as well, because many a times, OG, you'll see that these solution providers will give you historical details. So someday Flipkart got compromised 10 years back, and they will have those database exposed on the console that, hey, your user ID and password is compromised, but it's a dated data. We had already changed it years back. So multi-factor authentication helps a lot over here.
It's a wonderful piece of information for all of us. And I think when we are moving on, so we are adopting to cloud service providers. There are a lot of subscribers who are providing different services, which also leads to a discussion on the risk management framework. So coming back to the last question, which I like to pose to, Bhushan. So what is the impact on the risk management framework when you are subscribing to a cloud service provider?
Good afternoon, everybody. So we started our cloud journey somewhere around 2018 when we were evaluating whether we should migrate to cloud or stay hybrid or be on-premise all the way, right? So we had an established risk management guidelines, right, which typically comes from our parent state bank. And when we started our exploration of the cloud with taking some tenants and accounts with multiple CSPs, and even our local cloud services like Tata and others. So we're trying to identify some commonalities which are there with us as of now on-premise and what is different in the cloud. So as a lot of people have said, right? So we looked at our basics first. What are we able to do hands-on without getting somebody else? And one of the risks that came to us upfront was knowledge, skills, and these are, not much there, abundant in the wild. So how do we curtail those? Second, right, like what the President German said about your basic configurations, your CS benchmarks, right? So we looked at, one, what is interoperability between what I have to do certain work area on-premise vis-a-vis the similar area in the cloud? Do I need something else? Can it suffice? For an simplest example as your identity and access management. Will it work the same way? Will it change? Right, like what we just said, right? Access from personal units. Can we curtail it using what we have today? Yes, no. So what we did was we had a detailed assessment on minute aspects of cloud functions vis-a-vis on-premise functions and what we have versus what we don't have. And what is the impact of it? But it took us almost 1.5 years to complete this aspect. But this gave us insight into the things in areas like capabilities, both internal as well as external. Second, our practices in terms of deployments, in terms of infrastructure as well as your source codes. Then was your operations, which came into two aspects. One, secure configuration. Two, monitoring and the details that we need to get. Third, integration with your SIEM tools and the automation piece. The last aspect, another last aspect that we came across was vendor risks, right? Which typically we only look at data. I mean, where is it, how is it, all those things. But at that point in time in 2019, we never had any regulatory requirements or regulatory frameworks all around cloud, I think, except for RBI having certain aspects coming up, right? So we were trying to identify what all things can happen. So we tried to look at the Western world, Europe and US, what is happening over there. What is the regulator trying to say? GDPR had just come in place, right? And then we tried to see what all things are there in the contracts with the cloud service providers. And we tried to compare them with, say, on-premise, our data centers who provide me, say, a VM, vis-a-vis a cloud providing me a VM, right? And what is that I am going to miss as compared to my on-premise stuff, and what effect does it have contractually to me, right? Am I going to be bound with him for a longer time? And if I'm going to be bound with him for a longer time, what effect does it have, right? It also brought to our notice certain aspects like what Sachin said about right to audit, right? So, of course, by the time we moved to cloud, everybody was able to provide us at least our regulatory auditors to go ahead and visit and do those things, right? So risk framework conceptually changed from on-premise world, right? Because in on-premise you had a lot of control in your own hand, you could see, feel those things, and in cloud you don't have those kind of things, right? So with the view on that, along with our abilities to identify certain set of areas, and what we felt was that we are not yet well versed with certain other areas in cloud. So we got a consultant who had done a lot of such works, and combination of these two, the entire controls in our risk framework literally doubled, right? So my advice or my suggestion would be that try to see what you can extend vis-a-vis what you need to get on the cloud. And now, of course, now the tools have changed and a lot of things have happened. And real time or at least a monthly or a quarterly revisiting those controls will help you, because things in cloud are dynamic, changing, bringing in more controls, bringing in certain loopholes, right, will be constantly over there.
So what an interesting piece of information that, the change in the risk framework and constant monitoring, regular monitoring is very, very significant. Now, before I conclude, I'd like to throw one common question to all of the people, distinguished panelists sitting here. Can we really say that is cloud a necessary evil in the present scenario? Given the context that we have said that there are threats, but again, we see that there is an efficiency. But will anyone like to take up this question?
I'm really happy by moving into cloud. I'll give you a simple example. 10 years back, I was handling audits, and one of the first questions that I was asked by the auditor is, can you show me the visitor register to the data center? Are you frisking the people who are moving into your data center, coming out of the data center? Do you have CCTVs enabled in the data center? So that is the first nuisance that I've removed by moving into cloud. It's a very simple thing, but to be very serious about it, so on one single click of a button, there are multiple dashboards which are available to me, which was not available when I was working or when I had an on-prem data center enabled. So what is the health of my firewall? How is the WAF working? What is the health of my servers which I've enabled on cloud? How are the NACLs working? What are the status of the security groups? Which identities are created on it? Database logins, who all have logged in the last 24 hours? Whether they have used privileged authentication or normal authentication? Whether there is a role which is overlapping the policies which are created for other roles. I mean, hell lot of information that I'm able to ascertain through one single console or one single dashboard, which was not available to me. I had to maybe look into multiple Excel sheets, multiple tools to identify those details, which are now available to me in one single console. Management of those controls became easier by moving into cloud. And yeah, I also had this mental blockage 10 years back that if we move into cloud, we won't have any visibility. The data has moved somewhere, and I'm not able to identify where the data is hosted now. But now, after working for a few years now into the cloud ecosystem, I understand that we have thorough visibility, and we know where the data is resided because regions are defined in the cloud infrastructure as well, wherein we can establish which region I want to store my data into. And I'm able to take a well-informed decision by looking at the health status of various controls and configurations. So personally speaking, I'm happy, but I'm happy to hear any other comments. Yeah.
I would like to, hello. I would like to quickly add one point. I echo him completely. Right, when we had petrol cars, initially people thought, hey, you're moving with a bomb, right? It can burst anytime. So I feel cloud as a technology is inevitable, right? At some point in time, people will have to go, right, by hook and crook, by force, right, to cloud. At the most, probably we will have hybrid environment, right, where people probably will have legacy systems still running in traditional data center. But as and when we make that progress, I think in coming years, I see cloud covering at least 90%, 95% of the landscape in India.
So what an interesting piece to, conclude. Sunil, would you like to add something to it? Because, I see that you are also a service provider. So has there been any shift in this strategy when you are providing service to the government?
Yeah, so again, as mentioned by, there are regulators, they still insist to have on-premise data centers. So again, my take is, whatever the way you put it on cloud, we can look for hybrid solutions. You can have solutions on cloud, maybe some applications which is like CRM, maybe a Salesforce, or maybe SAP, or some similar application which is something which is not critical to business. You can put it on cloud. Even the emails which you can look at something as a from cloud. Entire security you can look at something deploying it on cloud, because everything is cloud-based solution as on today, which has AI and ML everything in place. So these are all certain things which you can look at having a hybrid setup that will again be cost effective, as well as it will provide you those relevant controls and checks.
Great. So I think this session had been of great enrichment to all the distinguished people sitting here. And just to conclude that, obviously we've seen that we are moving to cloud or digital space, yet we cannot ignore certain basics of configuration, IAM, PAM, data protection, constant monitoring using a security operations center. So these are some of the basic things that we can never ignore, even though we move from a physical setup to a virtual setup. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If there is any question.
Yeah, sure. Before we open the house for the question, a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful panel of experts here. And now, in the interest of the time, we can take 2 quick questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll pass on the mic. So can we have the mic to the lady there? Ma'am, I request you to kindly keep your hand raised. Yeah. please introduce yourself and your organization and question to which panel member.
Yeah, hi, this is Pratisha from Panoplia. I have two quick questions. One for Mr. Stanley. I was just curious about the numbers you said. Right? The insider threats were around 35%. Just curious how much of them were intentional versus unintentional insider threats?
36%, you compare, it is almost 20-25% was intention.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. That's scary. Okay.
That's really scary.
And one quick question for Mr. Sorry, I can't read. Prateek. Right. So you mentioned like clearly AWS has a lot of benefits and you know, a lot of tools. So do you see any gaps, like, you know, especially for identity and access management? Is there any scope for improvement or any gaps that you think exist right now with AWS or Okta or anything which can be improved? Because that is the next big thing in terms of securing. IAM is so critical.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure AWS or any other service provider would already be working on this particular gap. It is about getting access to these ecosystems, because these ecosystems are accessible over the internet, whether you're taking the management console approach or you're taking the SSM approach. Right, a command line input approach. The thing that I've seen is that these ecosystems are accessible from open internet through personal systems as well. Some workaround that we had identified for one of our organizations that I was managing is to enable Intune-based conditional access policy and integrating the ecosystem with Office 365, which means that through the conditional access policies, these ecosystems would be accessible only from company-provided Intune managed systems, which by default was accessible from any personal system. And these administrators or any other developer were able to download data, for example, from the buckets, or upload data, download data, make production changes on the codes through those personal systems, and we never had any visibility. We had the visibility about the identities which are trying to log in, but not the host names. The base Bastion host was not available to us. Through the conditional access policies, we were able to make a workaround on that.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can take one last question from the floor. Any question? Please raise your hand. Yeah, can we have the mic to the gentleman?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Surendra. I am from HDFC Bank. So my question is to the panel members. So sometime before we were talking about the regulatory frameworks that each and every organization has to abide by, right? When we talk about that, you know, be it any industry, BFSI, insurance industry, the question is on the cloud service provider. Do they follow any regulations? Because eventually it happens that, you know, as an organization, we are the one who's supposed to be following the regulation, but the service providers are not the one, and everything falls back to the organization. So anything that, you know, these service providers are also liable, and they should be abiding to these regulatory controls also that comes from RBI, SEBI, or any other regulators as such.
See, in India, right, all the CSPs, they're empaneled with MIT, right? Ministry of Electronics, right, in India. So they have certain guidelines published, okay? So their empanelment only happens after the CSP follows those guidelines, and there are audits by MIT empaneled auditors, which these guys have to go through. Second is, as far as all these cloud service providers are concerned, they are anyways governed by the law of the land in which the data center still holds, right? Now, what you need to actually understand is that what is your agreement with them, okay? Do you have certain clauses with respect to, say, data localization inbuilt into it, okay? Because other things you will typically get. Okay, for example, I will give an example. One of the service providers, right, had an outage in India on certain services. But if you trace back the outage reasons, the reasons were due to certain other services which were down in US, right? Now, this dependencies is what you would need to minutely understand, okay, apart from your regulatory environments, right? So, law of the land they will follow, they have to. As far as your specific governance, as far as RBI or other things are concerned, those are typically overlapping between, you know, MIT, RBI, SEBI, IRDAs, right? and now what we'll have as DPR, which will anyways, I mean, hopefully in another 6 months, we should see it getting passed. So there will be kind of an overlap between them, but you cannot get a guarantee that it will be like, everything would be there. So what typically CSPs are doing is they are providing you compliances with respect to all regulatories. So for example, with us in SEBI, right, we have to file those. With you guys, you have RBI. I think you guys already filed it last year. So these guys typically follow it, but if you want to get those details, one, you have their own web pages where you get this recent audit reports, right? Second is, you will, I think shortly, MIT will also give their audit report status on their website, is what we are being hearing. So you should be assured that those regulations would be typically followed by the CSPs.
Thank you, panel members. And now I would like to call on stage Mr. Rajiv Warrior, Vice President Sales from BD Software Distribution Private Limited, to kindly do the honors of felicitating this honorable panel. Rajivji, thank you so much for doing the honors. We'll start with Mr. Sunil Kulkarni. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause to Mr. Sunil Kulkarni from Protean eGovernment Technologies Limited for that wonderful contribution in the panel session. We move on to Mr. Amol Patil from Liberty General Insurance. A big round of applause to Amol for his wonderful contribution in the panel session. Moving next to Mr. Stanley Soloman from HealthIndia Insurance TPA. A big round of applause to Stanley for his wonderful contribution in the panel. Moving next to Mr. Sachin dhumal from SBI Global Factor. A big round of applause to Sachin for his wonderful contribution in the panel. Moving next to Mr. Awale Ajay from Aquapharm Chemical. A big round of applause to Mr. Ajay for his wonderful contribution in the panel. Moving next to Mr. Prateek Mishra from HDFC Credila Financial Services Limited. A big round of applause to Prateek for his wonderful contribution in the panel. Moving next to Mr. Bhushan Hatkar from SBI Mutual Funds. A big round of applause to Bhushan for his wonderful contribution in the panel session. And our honorable panel moderator, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rohit Raman from ETEK. A big round of applause to Rohit for wonderfully moderating this panel of experts. Would request the honorable panel members to kindly step forward for a group photograph. And Rajiv, if you could also join them. A big round of applause again, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful panel of experts here who spoke on cloud and infra security risks, threats, and challenges. And thank you, honorable panel members, for enriching us